But the thing that she doesn't like use
A brush?
a brush or stuff like that to style it.
I see.
She likes the wild look.
I like the wild look too. Okay. Done.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's a good way to start. You know, we can talk about how city streets are like hair.
I like hair?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I'll start and I'll say streets in Mexico City, especially certain parts of Mexico City, is like hair. It's like, you know, twisted and tangled and really difficult to understand, especially like in the old parts because they were still, I guess, pre-Hispanic before cars existed. So it's just footpaths. And then they made those into streets. And so let's just say they're not modern European urban design streets.
They're like very narrow.
They're very narrow.
Chaotic.
They're chaotic. You know. Pedestrian, you know, coexist on the same path, things like that.
So you have shared streets, basically?
Yeah, I mean shared. If you're talking about shared with streets and cars, yeah. I mean with cars and people, yeah, yeah, basically.
Okay.
What about Romania? Is it like hair, or is it maybe it's like slick hair?
I would say that we use a lot of segregation in terms of design.
Mm-hmm.
We have the streets for cars, and we do allocate a lot of part of it to cars. And we have the sidewalks. There's good connectivity and accessibility to the public transportation, but the ratio between space allocated to cars versus people is too high. So I think we should cosmeticize a little bit the wild hair, and we should prioritize people and bikes as well.
I'm surprised. I think I always imagine like Europe in general having like more human-centered streets.
Depends on the comparison. I mean, if you compare with the American streets, then yeah, we have like walkable cities, but only in terms of infrastructure.
Okay.
But then if you compare Bucharest with Cluj-Napoca, which is the second largest city in Romania, you're going to see there multiple pedestrianized streets. And right now, I think that they managed to close down streets for cars, like 3 or 4 in downtown, in the center of Cluj-Napoca. So it depends on the mayor, on the administrative process, and the vision.
It really varies a lot, city by city. I feel also here in the United States, you know, you have places like, I think it's Davis, that is like this bike paradise right next to Los Angeles, that is like this, you know, car-peeled deathscape in which we live in.
Right.
But yeah.
What about Tijuana?
Oof, no, Tijuana, since it's a city that really grew out of the car-centric era, like gas and cars, it's terrible, like walk-wise. The downtown area, since it's like the oldest place and it's very like touristy, it's very flat and you can really walk around. Streets are wide and they close them every once in a while. Sidewalks are big. But the rest of the city, if you don't have a car, you're basically screwed. I mean, if you take public transport, it can work out. But if not, like it's impossible, like to bike it or walk it. It's just too dangerous.
But what about urban sprawl? That's a thing in your city?
Yeah.
100%. It grows insanely. Like, I don't know if this is still accurate, but it was growing like a couple of hectares like every week or something like that. It's like wild. Yeah.
I think that, I mean, you might be interested in this because of your background, and we'll introduce Florina right after this.
And the podcast.
and the podcast. So I think two things. A lot of Latin American cities in general have this urban sprawl problem. And I think it has to do with, a lot of it has to do with affordability, and people can't afford. So what they do is they just, and it's easy to occupy like empty lots and vacant spaces, and they'll just self-construct, and there's no urban design. And I think that can be said about basically any Latin American urban place. And then the other thing that was curious about what Jose said was it like Tijuana is a new city, like Los Angeles, and European cities are old. So they were built after this whole like boom of cars. And I
Before,
think,
you mean?
Yeah.
Or you mean
Tijuana. Tijuana
yes,
was built after this,
Right.
and Los Angeles too. But so let's introduce our guest. We have
Yes.
Florina. I think I'm going to let you say your last name because I feel like I'm going to say it wrong.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Florina Chukitzo.
I was going to say it wrong. Okay, let's try that. Chukitzo.
Chukitzo.
Chukitza.
Chukitza.
Perfect.
Chukitzo.
I love it.
Perfect.
I like it. Chukitza. Okay.
And you are a PhD student in... Please go ahead.
I'm a visiting student researcher here at the University of Southern California, and I'm studying urban development in contemporary settings.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
It's super cool. Nice to have you here. And
Thanks for inviting me.
And this is Tacos de Sesos.
Oh, yeah.
Our first episode in English.
It's our first episode in English.
Episode 784 _34. And yeah, today we're gonna talk about walkability, whatever that means.
So Florina decided she was going to come to Los Angeles to study walkability, which is kind of weird. Well, it's not that way. I'm teasing her, but so tell us about why you're in Los Angeles and a little bit.
So my focus right now is on strategies at neighborhood level, how cities are focusing on improving the quality of life, starting with their neighborhoods. So right now, why? Because you said it. Los Angeles is interesting because it is the car-centric city. So in this environmental challenged world, to say so, how is this city improving its quality for its residents? So my focus right now, it is on mobility in terms of walkability and multimodal transportation for sure. Yeah.
And are you studying Los Angeles in this case?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh,
that's very interesting.
Specifically downtown, not Los Angeles entirely. Yeah.
That's cool. And maybe before we go into the conceptual part, like what have you found so far?
I'm still at the beginning of my research, so only interesting things like, for instance, I don't know if you guys knew, but Los Angeles didn't develop like this, like the horizontal development due to cars, but everything started with railway transportation,
the
actually.
trolleys.
Yeah, because they permitted people to actually live in other parts besides downtown. And they were connected by public transportation, let's call it that way. And at the beginning, it was like a transit-oriented development. Let's say it's not the same concept, but it was something around it. But they say, some books say that the public transportation, the company was a private company. They had some issues and they didn't deliver the best services. And I think they competed with buses. And at some point, they realized that they could build on other parts and gain more money if they will implement cars, because they were invented. So they started to actually build roads for cars, and that was it. That was the beginning of what we know at this moment. Yeah.
That's one way to tell the story, you know. Another way is the oil and car companies bought the public transportation companies and then took the trolley out.
Stop it. Jose, why do you always have to bring politics in this?
I'm sorry. I can't help myself.
Maybe because that's his thing. But
Exactly.
so that's one of the interesting things about research, and I think it's like you can define different concepts or different historical moments from different perspectives. Like if you do talk about, changing transport from a political science point of view, the first thing that comes to mind, I think, is like, or that you discuss, is like the exertion or the abuse of power to,
Right.
who
is doing what?
Who's doing what? And if you're talking just about mobility, then you're just, so maybe you don't even think about it. You think about just the physical.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good way to talk about the paper that you recommended for us to read, because there's different approaches to understanding one specific concept, in this case, walkability. So tell us a little bit about what this article says, and maybe if you remember the author, and tell us a little bit what you recommended us.
Yes, I do remember the author, but I hope that I will pronounce her name correctly.
tough
So
one.
if not, I'm sorry. The name of the author is Ann Forsyth.
Mm-hmm.
So she studied the definitions of walkability. And this is really important because we use walkability interchangeable for different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, so that's how she proposed it and analyzed everything. She has like 3 categories.
Mm-hmm.
One, it's about the physical dimension. So she talks about walkability in terms of transversable, how the infrastructure part, right, to transit from point A to point B. Then it talks about a compact city, so small distances. Then it talks about safety, perceived and actual safety, which is
Right.
important
Definitely.
because we are also in LA, so we should talk about safety.
100%.
But then she talks about outcomes. For instance, one of the outcomes of livability, of walkability would be livability, of course. And the third is the praxis. That's how she defines it, because she talks about walkability as a holistic solution. For instance, walkability will reduce pollution, for instance, but that's not a direct.
Right. That's why it's a proxy. It's not, you can't. It's not directly measured through.
Exactly.
But it's an effect. It's like an indirect effect. No, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's a very interesting discussion because walkability is such a buzzword, like everyone's saying, yeah, we need more walkable cities and stuff. And just the fact that the author is putting it on the table, that what do we mean by that, There's like very different things that come from it. And this idea that not all walkabilities are the same, I also found to be very interesting, right? Because it can be a combination of these 3 things in different measures. So, yeah, I thought it was cool. I don't know, like something I wanted to ask is like, what do you think? Do you think it makes sense to keep the concept of walkability, or as such like a big tent definition for it, or should we maybe have like different concepts under this umbrella? If that makes sense.
At this point, I really think we should be careful how we use it, because as you said, we have different indicators for walkability, to say so. In America, I'm sure that walkability means something different than in Europe, because when we are talking about walkability, for instance, in Europe, we are also thinking about the beauty of architecture surrounding us. So we are talking about the physical built environment around us. Also, we are talking about different activities there. So, or a space that will allow us to play, either take photos or to take our kid there or to bike or.
Yeah.
So and another important thing is quality of the air quality, and also shade through different greeneries, and also reducing the space for the accessibility for cars.
Mm-hmm.
But please let me know, because maybe you know more right now in terms of America. But I think that for them, walkability is just in terms of maybe infrastructure. Maybe they are thinking about land use. If there is a mixed land use density, this is also important in Europe. But we are also focusing on the environment, on the physical enticement. How
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I don't think it's that. I think they like in the U.S. there is an emphasis like in the I guess all of these other things, especially the aesthetic aspects of walkability. Like, why would people walk? But I think the parameters are different. Like, what something seems like more attractive while you're walking for a European might be different than what is attractive for somebody in the United States. And I think that's where the difference is. It's not that they don't focus on it. And also, I think public policy, I don't know anything. Like, I've read public policy for Los Angeles and some public policy in New York. So there is a lot of I guess it's a lot human-centered policies, you know? But I'm not. I've never read anything in Europe, so I'm not sure where that difference is. But I think it has to do less on policy and more in how people perceive, you know, what is a walkable place in two different contexts. Complete. That's what I think. I don't know what you would say about that.
For what I read so far, they have like this principle, or at least in California state, the complete streets principle.
Right.
No, what's that?
The complete streets principle means that you have a street with infrastructure for people, so the sidewalks, infrastructure for bikes, and infrastructure for bus lanes, so a dedicated bus lane for public transportation, and also you have the lanes for cars.
Okay.
But when you go to Europe, when you're talking about walkability in terms of design, you have super blocks, for instance. You have One Earth, you have the 15-minute cities, and all of them talk about reducing access to cars.
Right.
They are not having everything. They do have accessibility to cars, but it is reduced. Because, for instance, if we are thinking about super blocks, they are permitting access within the super blocks only for residents, right?
Right.
With cars. And the so the traffic is moved outside. So it is a little bit of a difference here.
No, totally, because in a way, in the California model, as you're putting it, like the car doesn't lose its access, right? It's just accompanied by these other things. And I don't know, I feel like it also has a lot to do with like the starting points. Because for a lot of cities in Europe, like they're like small compared to American cities, at least, right? So there's a lot of things you can do without the car or without public transportation.
Right.
But in terms of the United States, like the distances are already so large. Like, you know?
But it's not just location, but it's also time. I think it's the newer American cities are the ones that are built like that, because a lot of the older cities, like New York, Boston, Chicago, they still follow a more European urban planning style. So I think like American style urban planning isn't really that visible. Well, it's visible in the suburbs, and I think it's visible in certain cities like Los Angeles and a lot of the western cities, I think.
Right, but like, I mean, for example, still in New York, if you want to get to a long distance, you're going to need a car.
That's true.
You know, like public transportation is only going to take you so far. Like in like coming back to walkability, for example, I feel like walkability in New York means being able to walk to the metro and then walk from the metro to where you're going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whereas in other places, walkability, like in this super block or 15-minute city
different.
approach, it's like staying within a small radius.
You have everything there. For instance, for example, a school maybe, or a cafe, or a library, or a park, or an open space for people to just interact. So yeah, you should have different amenities within a walking distance.
That's the whole idea of the 15-minute city, right? Okay. So another thing that you recommended us to read was Gehl. Is that how you pronounce his name?
I think so.
Jan, I don't know. He's some Danish.
He's from Copenhagen. Yeah.
He's a Danish. And I really like, I remember reading about Gehl.
It's the circuit thing? The other one you sent out?
No,
It's another
that's Geoff Boeing. We can talk about Geoff Boeing
Yeah.
too. Geoff Boeing is from USC, and like his
Oh, cool.
approach to walkability is more like mathematical, like distance. It's really interesting, and we'll talk about
GIS
but
stuff.
yeah, GIS stuff. But you mentioned Gehl. Why do you like Gehl? What do you like about Gehl?
He did something, I don't know if you heard. I mean, I think everyone heard about his book, Cities for People.
I have not.
Okay, so I recommend that book. It is
Yeah.
really interesting, and he changed a lot, like others, like Jane Jacobs, for instance, or Appleyard. Their work actually focused on improving the human scale, on focusing on human scale,
Okay.
because he thought about it, what type of an environment, right? It's a perfect fit for humans.
Interesting.
You need architecture, but at human scale.
Right.
So he studied that. Then he talks about life between buildings. What exactly do we need? Because we need like activated facades. For instance, in terms of safety, if you have closed facades during the night, that's not safe.
Right, because people can't see.
Exactly. So you would have light. You'd be more comfortable walking down that street. Of course, you need lighting. You also need activities. So he talks about this idea of walkable cities, or cities developed at focused on people, to improve social connections, to improve the environment. So that's why I recommend Gehl.
Yeah,
That's
and I
super
think they made a documentary, about his ideas. I think or have you seen it? No.
I think I've heard about that, but I didn't.
It's called The Human Scale. So he's not obviously didn't direct it. I don't know who's the director, but they talk about his whole idea of human scale, which is crazy that we have to talk about the human scale. That
Right.
that tells you like how influential
hilarious, yeah.
the cars have been in developing cities, where it's like, okay, wait, we need to talk about us. Wait, the cities are for us too, not just for cars.
Not just that, somehow he also talks about like skyscrapers,
Right.
and why
that's another
it is
thing he talks
important
about.
to not only focus on high-rise buildings, but on other types of
Like mid-rise or underground.
exactly.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah. One concept that.
And another important part that he says, that we should focus on the speed, because humans walk at the 5 kilometer per hour
Right.
speed.
That's
But
super
by
cool.
comparison with cars, that's a really different. So it's unsafe
Yeah.
to actually both of us live in the same environment,
Totally.
because we can. I don't know. All of
Die.
us saw like the numbers
Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting.
with only on car accidents and everything.
Yeah, no, and one concept that makes sense to bring at this point, I think, is, I don't know if you guys heard of the Strode.
No.
So, and I shout out to my friend Emilio Ramirez that introduced me to this concept. But so you have streets where people like live, walk. There are shops, there are crosswalks, there are like places where people go, and then you have roads that are connecting different streets. You know what I mean? Like the road is to move fast through an area to get to another one.
Right.
A street is a place where you're at. And the problem with the US, and this is very prominent here in Los Angeles, is that you have stroads that are like places that combine both places where people want to be and shop, and where cars are going extremely
Right.
fast, right?
Right.
So it's
But
super dangerous.
That basically is almost defining any street in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And so, but there are pockets, and I was telling Florina that there's like these little small walkable pockets in Los Angeles. And I don't know if it has to do with this old plan. Remember we were talking about the concept Los Angeles. There is an old urban plan for Los Angeles. I think it's from the I'm going to botch this, but it's maybe 1950s.
Makes sense.
And so their urban plan design was to have different centers, like Los Angeles to be a polycentric urban
Cool.
place. So
Yeah.
so each place would have like its own, independence. So you wouldn't have to theoretically go very far from where you live to shop, to get entertainment, blah blah blah. And so I think there's a lot. I feel like a lot of these little pockets, like if you go to downtown Long Beach, downtown Fullerton, downtown, and those places feel walkable.
Culver City.
Yeah.
Echo Park in a certain degree. Santa Monica.
So they're there. Like there's little pockets of walkability, but everything's just disconnected. Like everything's really far. That's the way I feel about Los Angeles.
No, for sure. And it's so crazy how like I've been looking at a lot of old maps recently, and you see like before, Los Angeles is here, Pasadena is here, Santa Monica is here. But then, like, how it all connects through, like, suburbs and freeways.
Right.
It's just, like, a good plan that went wrong,
But Metro right now is really investing in multimodal transportation. I know for sure that in downtown, they opened 3 new lines.
Yes.
So the Bunker Hill, which provides
Bunker
you
Hill.
accessibility directly to Broad and Mocha. So the Grand Ave corridor, cultural corridor, how they call this is how they call it, I think.
Yeah.
There's
Tokyo?
the historic, Little Tokyo, and there's the historic Broadway.
Right.
So that's important.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes those little like adding stations to public transportation gets so overlooked as like, oh, they're adding a new station, and it's like, whatever. But it changes the whole dynamic. It can change the whole dynamic of a specific area. The fact that you can arrive there through public transportation.
No, totally. And hopefully they'll add not only new stations, but also, like, new lines to connect the grid. The big problem, as we all know, in Los Angeles Metro is that it's like a spider, right?
Yeah.
Like you have the center and all the legs go out.
Yeah.
But if you want to get from one leg to another, you got to go through downtown. So
That's the transportational hub. Yeah, downtown.
Yeah.
and I don't know. There's with a few more lines, they could make at least one first kind of like halo around.
Well, like in Mexico City,
Yeah.
I think what they did was, I think Cetrams is the name of these things. And what they did was, like, now that you mention transportation hubs, is like, I guess the problem was not the amount of lines, but the lack of hubs. So because there's no hubs where you connect multiple lines, and thinking that, if Los Angeles is like this polycentric, like I've never, like, it's difficult for me to think of, and maybe I'm wrong because like, I've only been here for a couple of years, so maybe if somebody's going to comment and tell me that I'm stupid or whatever, but it doesn't matter.
I don't think so.
It's as far as I know from Los Angeles, but I don't know if there's a transportation hub in Long Beach, for example. Well, there is one downtown, like there is. So I think maybe it's not about, I mean, yes, of course it's about lines, but it's also about designing hubs, like really strategic hubs in these places that are more walkable,
They are really trying to focus more on transport-oriented development.
Right.
I've read this in different, plans and policies, but I don't know exactly if they managed to
and it's
implement
a
it
monster,
everywhere.
I mean, we're sitting here, in the comfort of a podcast room at University of Southern California, but then there's urban planners out there who are trying to figure out what to do with this monster of a city, and so that's a respectable job. It's a very challenging job
it
too,
is.
Totally.
because it's hard.
And I don't know, it's crazy, like, to think of the historical arc of the city. Like,
Right.
from what you were saying, Florina, like, from a very, like, sprawling city based on the trolley system to a super car-centric city, and now slowly trying to go back to that, public transit-based sprawl. And let's hope they're able to make it.
Yeah.
Especially
That'd
for the
be great.
Olympics. So what do you know about that? Like, I've heard there's this big plan. Have you read anything about trying to fix, like, public transportation in the city in general for the Olympics?
Besides the fact that they plan to connect the metro lines directly to the airport, I don't know no. Unfortunately, no.
I've seen
Sorry.
some changes. I've seen, for example, more security on the buses, which is not maybe directly related to what we're talking about, but it might be. A part of walkability is safety.
No,
And
I
yeah.
think it is because I think one of like the other concepts in that first article that you sent us, like one of the concepts was safety.
Yeah.
it is.
So if you don't like, you could have the infrastructure, you know, but it doesn't matter if it's not safe because nobody's going to write it.
Right.
Exactly.
You could have the infrastructure, but if there's nothing to do in these hubs, you know, why would you use them? Like, again, you know, the example of Los Angeles, like I use public transportation to ride my bike, and then I go to these transportation hubs where all the, like a lot of lines, I guess, meet, you know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of transit lines, but there's nothing, it's just a hub. So it's
Yeah.
like,
You're talking about destinations, right?
right, there's no, like some of these hubs should be in destinations, but a lot of the transportation hubs in Los Angeles don't lead to anywhere. They just drop you off like in the middle of nowhere. So sometimes I'm like, I know at night, I'm like, okay, I need to go back and I'm going to end up in this hub because
That's empty. Yeah.
yeah, it's empty. There's nothing there. There's, I mean, you know, I have to wait for a bus and it just, I feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere, but I'm not in the middle of nowhere. I'm in a transit hub, but it feels like the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
They did. I think. I mean, this is the first time that I've been to this event. So I'm talking about Bunker Hill.
Okay.
Yes.
We all know the history and everything.
May-
The
may-
important
maybe-
thing is
Okay.
that they have open plazas and pedestrian pathways that are separated from the streets. So cars
Right.
are not allowed to go through there, but they do have this magnificent open spaces. And what they did this last Saturday, they organized an event called Grand Ave Art.
Yeah.
And it was amazing because it was organized together with all the cultural entities on that
Yeah.
area. So we have a lot of them.
Yeah. Music Center, Broad, Mocha,
Exactly.
Disney Concert Hall.
Exactly. But also with the help of Metro. And Metro
Cool.
did something cool. And I saw this also during Ciclavia, which is
Okay.
another event that I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
They brought the bus. And the bus is painted, and they talked about art. They provided
cool.
like cards, tap cards.
Right,
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the
Tap
name.
cards, yeah,
tap
tap
cards, yeah,
cards.
for free for people to actually have it and use it. And it was really interesting because those open plazas, open spaces were activated. I saw
Right.
children. I saw a lot of young people, and they were enjoying concerts or performances, or they were part of a workshop dedicated there on climate change, I think. So
Right.
everything was different. It was really
But
different.
That's so cool.
That's good, and I think that you know, and this is a little bit related to what I'm studying here, but the idea of creating,
They had a lot of
spaces.
food there.
yeah, well, it's not just food, but just creating temporary spaces. You know, it doesn't have to be like, you know, and
A
you've probably
permanent
heard
thing.
this. It doesn't have to be permanent, but when you talk about tactical urbanism, sometimes it's just, let's just do one thing that's going to activate this place every Sunday. And maybe it's like an not abandoned, but like an empty transportation hub. But what if you make a market there every weekend? And you, all of a sudden, that place isn't just this random place, but you go there on Sundays and it activates the whole area. It's kind of like what you're talking about here, where what they did downtown, which I think is, I think, and this is something you and I have talked about, that it's really difficult to make the city walkable infrastructure-wise in California or in Los Angeles because it's just too big. But what you can do is make these temporary spots like ciclovia. So you mentioned ciclovia. Tell us how that works.
First of all, it is an amazing event. I loved it. I took my bike there. I wasn't by myself. I was with my friends. And first of all, I experienced the city differently.
Wow.
It was amazing. I got to actually look closer to the architecture to actually enjoy and see.
Yeah.
I also visited the Eco Park.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And Boyle Heights. Oh my God, Boyle Heights was such a discovery for me.
It's amazing.
Loved it. I need to go there by public transportation again because they have the Plaza Mariachi. Right?
The expo line.
Yeah,
goes there.
exactly. But besides that, I also got to experience different cuisines because they were
Right.
everywhere. They had food trucks and also people didn't just bike; they actually walked or just spent time outside.
Mm-hmm.
So it was different. We had music.
So I guess, going full circle on walkability, that sounds like a walkable place.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Temporarily.
temporarily.
But how does it work? Like they close a certain freeway or street, or like what part do they close?
So this was only in downtown,
Yeah.
and they have like a route. They established a route.
Oh, gotcha.
But I can't tell you exactly what.
You
what
go
I know
through the bridge, the 6th
yeah,
bridge?
a
That's really cool.
really amazing bridge. Yeah, it was interesting.
That's awesome.
I like that. I mean, I think, and this is, so I think in cities like Los Angeles, that is so difficult for pedestrians and for people to walk. I think for me, that seems like a really useful solution, like temporary walkable
Right.
spaces.
Yeah, it's like a timeshare with
But besides
the city.
the temporarily, because I know they have a problem. For instance, I read that the number of people killed by accidents, it's by car accidents,
Yeah.
it's higher than the homicide,
Oh, wow.
which is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
do need to improve the infrastructure.
Right. And like you're saying, the homicide rate in LA is not a small number of people. No,
Can we
it
stop?
really isn't.
Wait, we were talking about good stuff of Los Angeles, and now we're back to bad stuff. So,
What I'm saying, it's a big problem, the car stuff.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
problem
yeah.
for sure.
But it was something interesting. So this is what I read about the history of LA in one book. The author said that, so Los Angeles, I think, experienced traffic congestion around 1930 by comparison with other U.S. cities or Europe. Because they experienced it around 1950 or 1960.
So
1960.
LA
Yeah.
invented traffic, basically.
Wait, but that was possible. Yeah, but that was possible because so the people that moved here were U.S. farmers or already people that had money and cars, so they had the culture.
Uh-huh.
So when they moved automatically with their cars,
Right.
and they wanted just one, not small, but just one house for them, not to live
Yeah.
like in buildings and stuff like that.
Right.
So
it's
that was
much
a factor.
Space, so many
Mhm.
cars.
And you said something like a really magical word there, which is car culture. So car culture in the U.S. in general, but I don't know if in Europe it's the same, but I think here, people take care of their cars, and it's like this unique piece of property that
Lowrider culture. all
lowrider
that
culture,
stuff.
which I love. So it's like, I mean,
Lowrider?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Sorry.
this cars that like bounce, like very classic
okay.
cars.
Those are the low riders. Yeah. There's no low riders in Romania that no.
I don't
We
even
have
know
to-
if that's legal.
Hey, we should probably go to a low rider show.
I know, yeah, we should organize
with Florina. We should go.
Let's go
do
for
it.
sure.
Yeah.
And then we
It's
organize a
interesting.
lowrider show in Romania.
Yeah, you can.
Let's check if it's legal.
When you're working in Romania as an urban planner, you can say, yes, we're going to do a car show with lowriders in Romania. That sounds like it would work.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like a whole cultural phenomenon. Like people paint the cars, there's like a whole style behind it.
I saw a car with fur.
Yeah.
It was really
It might
weird.
be one.
Wow.
Yeah, it might be one. Yeah,
Maybe.
with fur and gold, rims and things like that.
Okay.
Chrome rims. So, I mean, I think we're pretty close to starting to wrap up here. So, I think we talked about good things about LA and bad things about LA, about walkability, and there's just these magical places of Los Angeles, but it's really hard to get to. And so my wife and we've been here for a couple of years, and we were talking about LA, and we decided that LA is like a toxic girlfriend. Because it's really nice, it's got these things, but you just gotta peel, and then, LA is kind of like that, where you just gotta get to know her. And it's like when you tell your friend, hey man, my girlfriend's great, and like she's not, you just don't know her. And it feels like when you talk about LA, it's kind of like that.
No, for sure. Like when I'm out in a conference or whatever, it's always like, you live in LA? Oh, I heard it's terrible.
terrible.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? I love LA,
No, for sure.
Or people say it's impossible to move in public transportation here, but people do it.
I
You
do
know,
it
we
all
do
the
it.
time. And,
Yeah.
and I complain about it like with my toxic girlfriend, but I like LA. I have fun in LA.
Exactly,
It's like a
exactly.
toxic girlfriend.
Exactly. No, you have to love LA because everyone told me like, no, it's gonna be that and this and that, and don't take the public transportation. I do take it, and
Yeah.
it's pretty
not that
impressive.
bad.
It's not
It's
that
not bad.
the views and everything. I went to Santa Monica by train.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've done that. It's nice.
It
It's
is
a nice
pretty.
trip.
That's awesome. And I love that line because it's literally Santa Monica to East LA.
Exactly. It's direct, and you have art in different types of transit stations. You have
Right.
for
There's
sure.
art in the
All
transit
over.
stations. Yeah.
The red line, which gets a bad rep because it does have some very nasty stations, but like the infrastructure itself, especially in the Hollywood part, it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, it's
So-
nice.
Yeah. So is LA walkable? We're gonna end with that question, and you have to answer yes or no.
after I finish my article. No, you can downtown. I'm going to talk about downtown. You
Yeah.
can definitely walk through downtown on certain parts. Because,
Yeah.
for instance, you won't go to Skid Row,
Right.
or the majority of people won't go there.
Yeah.
But they're connected. Actually, I think I walked from Bunker Hill to South Park.
Yeah.
It was okay.
Yeah. So yeah. Any conclusions about walkability, Jose, before we say goodbye?
Nothing. I hope they get their act together before the Olympics. It's like such a unique chance for the city to really invest in public transportation, and I hope they do. People vote for politicians that push walkable cities, that push the metro plan. There's a super cool metro plan with a bunch of stations. There's an Eco Park station, but it's like 2040 or something like that.
Yeah.
So let's hope it happens. What about you? Any closing thoughts?
I already said mine. I think LA is like a toxic girlfriend, but yeah, I think I think it's a really interesting topic. I think you chose a very interesting place to study walkability.
Yeah.
And I think walkability is a lot of people use and talk about walkability, but it's not that easy. It's
No,
a
it's not.
really-
And
yeah.
also, a lot of people talk about walkable and walkability, which mean different things.
Yeah, no, it gets tricky, and that's why, there's people like Florina who decide to study about these things. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
It was
Thank
fun.
you so much, and thank
It
you
was.
everyone for listening. See you next time.
Bye.
Was it fun, Florina?
It was
fun?
really fun.
Should I
Always-
stop the?
Yeah. I think we-